just answering 2 questions for today. It'll be about 2 people who do very, very similar things for very similar purposes, but one of them is trying to do it in such a way that they don't harm the world, and the other one doesn't care. Someone claims one of my videos where I critique a subject matter is wrong, or at least pointed out something that I may have mistaken or not paid attention to. A channel called Tech Kit Realms, or some variation of it, there's actually more than one name apparently, says that some page or some source was encoded in base 64, and that is significant. Let's learn what base 64 encoding is. We take anything that is binary and turn it into text. There's many ways of doing that. One of the ways to do it is to take any file like a picture or a video or a computer program. They all basically show up as one thing. A file. What is a file? Well, it contains whatever you have in it. And it can have something in there that is easily read by a human being, or it might be a picture. The thing is, depending on how you're doing this on a computer, you're going to represent it as letters and numbers on a screen. Many of you have seen hexadecimal code. You take a byte, which has all 8 bits in it used. And if you do that, you may have noticed that most of the things that this would represent, if you did them as a single character of the alphabet, are blanks or bang splats, or move the cursor around, but they don't actually display anything. So what's done is instead you bust up that 8 bits into 2 4-bit sections. This is 16 combinations, and this is 16 combinations. 8-bit is 256 combinations. One of them being 0, so 0 through 255. By doing it this way, you can represent these as numbers and letters. You do it through as 0 through 9 and then A through F for this one, and same thing with this. And it just makes 2 characters. But that means to represent it on a screen, you take a single byte and make it into 2 bytes. That's inefficient. It takes up more space than it needs to, because we have a whole alphabet too, not just the 10 numbers. We have 26 letters. And that gives us 36 combinations. And if we use upper and lower case letters, we end up with 26 times 2 plus 10. Okay, 26, 40, 52, 62. And if we use just 1 or 2 extra characters, we can have 64 characters that we use. And you can even use variations of this. And this lets us take something that would normally be a long string in binary, very long string, or a very long string in, let's say, I don't know, hexadecimal, which would take up twice the space, and we can compact it tighter. Each character represents 64 bits, or 64 combinations, actually. We're using base 64, which means each character has 64 combinations possible. Okay, well, what does that do? Well, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Each character of the alphabet, upper and lower case, with numbers and a couple of special characters like question mark and asterisk or whatever, something like that, can encode 6 bits. It's not 8 bits, but it's not just 4, and it's more efficient. That's why at the end of this video URL, you might see a bunch of upper and lower case letters and numbers, and maybe even underscores. That's base 64. It actually translates to an ID code that's a really long string of characters. 64 to whatever, if you have 10 characters, that's, well, that's 6 bits, right? I'm doing this numbering wrong. I'm probably making mistakes. But that would be like 60 bits of data stuffed into 10 characters. That's a pretty good compression ratio. And this is also one of many methods that's used for things like sending you an email using a text-only old system to send a picture or a video. Now, this also makes it generally URL safe, so you don't have to have it do any weird escape characters. YouTube video ID codes use that. You can look up Tom Scott's video, will YouTube ever run out of video ID codes? The answer is no, because it can just add more characters to it, and it's compact enough, and you and I can type it by hand and send it without some program getting freaked out because it looks like code. It also unfortunately means that every once in a while a YouTube URL will have a foul word in it or some joke almost in it. Base 64 encoding is not what the Tekkit realm said it is in a video, period, full stop. And there are other links in the video that are talked about here where people are telling him that, and they're direct URLs. Now, why am I covering this subject? The Tekkit Realm is the source for and the creator of the story called Would You Like to Join the Legion? He created it. He created fake proof that it was an organic thing that happened on the internet he's reporting about. He is not. He lied. Now, the reason I can say that so confidently isn't arrogance on my part. It's that he left a bunch of clues in his videos, almost like he's begging you to find out about this for a simple reason. I believe, and most people do believe, that he's doing this as basically a fun activity, and he's trying to make sure he doesn't hurt anybody. None of the stories he reports on have any reality about them, so there's nobody who's going to get hurt. That's the idea. Now let's talk about somebody else entirely. Let's talk about the history of Oracle. Oracle, the software routine, created in 1970s, 1978 is the last time I checked it, it's accurate, by Larry Ellison, Ed Oates, and Bob Miner. Miner died in 1994. The other two are in their 70s. They created the company that became called Oracle because they wrote a routine almost immediately after they started their company, and they named it Oracle. Then they just named the company Oracle Corporation because that's all they sold at the time. Oracle is not a piece of magic work. In the 70s, people had databases, big ones, and they needed to be able to deal with them. And writing an efficient, streamlined method for interacting with things was important. But the other part of it that was important was making sure that it would be trustworthy. If you're running a bank or a hospital and you buy a piece of software to handle a database containing information about people's bank accounts so that your bank machine works, or you have a database that contains medical information, you are under legal obligation to make it literally impossible for that information to ever be locked away. For the bank, it would mean not financial destruction, but they'd be strung up. And for hospitals, they would be ridiculously liable for screwing up even one damn bit of data. So the database routines have a peculiarity. They are not required for you to control your database. The database has to be totally separate. In some way or another, it has to be exportable or interpolable, which means no secrets. Which means one of the things you do in college is write your own version of Oracle's software. In fact, Oracle had the information up on how to do this. And many people have worked for or at Oracle Corporation, including a janitor. Being a janitor at the company is, I've worked at Oracle. And many of these people went on to work at various companies that use Oracle software or write their own version of it. If I'm putting up a bunch of machines that are point-of-sale terminals or cash registers, I might use Oracle to set up my database because it's fast. I can use it to do this. But I would be obliged to write my own version of it instead of a 2 gigabyte download, links below in the description. I would need to write one that's tiny. I've written a database routine that does a limited set of what Oracle does that fits on a single floppy, and even smaller than that. And I used script kiddie methods. Script kiddie methods means I use other people's work and throw it on the disk and link it. And if you're not aware of it, Oracle's software, when you're building something to make it work correctly, you literally throw components into it from them or other places. I didn't write my version of Firefox. I threw a bunch of plugins into it and set a bunch of preferences and then back them up. But someone would actually pay me $50 to streamline it for a particular purpose, like I do for research. That doesn't mean I'm an excellent programmer. That means I script kiddied it. And you know what? That's what you're supposed to do. Sitting there groveling the system by writing things in binary isn't necessary. It's a waste of time. You're wasting money, and it's not worth it. Meanwhile, throwing components together is exactly how Windows is written. So, being a script kiddie isn't a bad thing if it works. But why did I say janitor? Because many people who worked at Oracle or any other company worked as a janitor somewhere else, because being a computer hacker or programmer doesn't pay well. It's not regular money. And your day job, if it means that you're a janitor at some other company, means you have all the keys to their server room and can use it for your hacking activity. And you have keys to everybody's room so you can get their passwords, which they always freaking stick underneath their keyboard on a sticky note. Next. I am John Cullen, or Johnny Hoover, may or may not have claimed the following: to have written a front end for Oracle. There's a tutorial on how to do it yourself. You can do it the script kiddie way, or you can do it by typing commands out, or make it into a set of instructions to build it. I do the same thing repackaging Firefox. I built my own package for it, meaning my own installer and build. I used a piece of software called Insys because I did the script kiddie method, because that's called being efficient. If you want to get something done, look for the one who's lazy. Odds are they're going to do it the most efficient and simple way, and you can copy what they're doing because they don't give a shit because they're lazy. Another person said that John Cullen worked for Oracle, and then misspelled Oracle, and he did, quote-unquote, a mapping program used by the authorities to scare people, because Cullen is now claiming to whistleblow, because he's part of the problem, of writing software that was used by Johns Hopkins University or something, his database front end, to lie about a pandemic. Now, number one, in order for him to confirm any of this, he couldn't be anonymous. He'd have to prove he worked at Oracle. He'd have to prove he worked at Johns Hopkins. And he'd have to prove he wrote a front end, which is not impressive. Or we could just say, none of this is an impressive claim, and anybody can be a janitor. And I want to point out, when I was a janitor working at the base of a building in the mall, in the food court, for years, I would also have all the keys to the server room at the top that literally ran AT&T for a few years. Because that's one of the reasons I liked working there, is I had unlimited access to one of the largest computers on the planet, because it is essentially a giant computer if you link all of those machines together. But that doesn't mean I worked at AT&T. I was a janitor. Also, the word janitor is used for someone who fixes computer programs by removing the bugs, by throwing shit together, making it work, by pinning together, and then, last part, decompiling or reverse engineering everything and making an optimized version that fits on one stinking floppy. Janitor has multiple meanings. It's a double entendre with a backflip and a wink and a nudge to a blind bat. Now, someone said, I let you critique and have your opinion. Well, thank you very much. That's mighty wonderful of you to let me have my opinion and critique things. As we don't agree on many things, but agree on some, and I have liked your content on things. And yes, I do appreciate this person. I'm just being a jerk for a second here. But anyway, thank you for apologizing to True Crime Jesus and another YouTuber. No, I mentioned that I couldn't prove that they lied about something, or that they were lying about lying, or lying about implying something by lying. So I admitted I can't actually prove it in a courtroom status. However, I also said in the video, they were obviously implying it, and they were bullshitting people. It wasn't an apology. Splitting hairs here is pathetic. I'm not splitting hairs, they did. We didn't technically claim that. They left plausible deniability by just stopping short of doing something that would get them thrown into a courtroom for lying about somebody. That's all they did. So not really apologizing to them. I'm stating for a fact I can't prove that they're full of shit, but I know they were on one subject. And it doesn't even matter what it was. It's water under the bridge years ago. Literally. I usually don't jump on you. I find you highly intelligent, but try to back off a little with the critiquing, please. You don't have to be such a condescending dick all the time. Relax. Okay. Regarding the other YouTuber, he makes helicopter assertions, and I think he's backed him up several times. No, he hasn't. He's literally refused to. You're wrong. And I mean that in a very absolute way. Johnny Cullen, or I am John Cullen, or Johnny Hoover, or whatever he wants to call himself, an anonymous character, in my opinion. He's still anonymous. Got obsessed with his first assertion that he heard helicopters and or guns because of a GoPro Hero that made a popping noise because it kept trying to find a Wi-Fi connection because it was Wi-Fi enabled and didn't have the shielding in place. That's literally something he will never cop to. Then the person here says, he understands data just as well as you do. He created Oracle, for fuck's sake. No, he fucking didn't. Apparently he either did or did not work at Oracle, and that doesn't mean anything. He could have had any job. And apparently he wrote a front end, which anybody can do. I'm going to leave a link to the tutorial and the 2 gigabyte download for the Oracle app that you can use to build it, to test it yourself. Or he worked at Johns Hopkins, or he didn't. His assertion about whether or not a pandemic is real is bullshit, because it's based on him claiming to be a whistleblower of inside information but can't confirm it. No, I don't care if he says he understands data. That doesn't change whether he lies about it. That doesn't change whether or not the other guy lied about stuff too. People lie all the time on the internet. But anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And yes, I'm talking about two channels doing nearly the same thing, but one of them is trying not to cause people to get hurt. Good day.